Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a really critical component of healing, and that goes into the nervous system. And we're going to dive into a lot of the biology and science as to why this is such a critical piece. But I think it's also a really kind of underappreciated aspect within the healing journey. And so, if you're here and you're someone like Jessica and I, where you've done all the right things, you've taken all the supplements, you've eaten really clean, you've done all the air quote right stuff, and you're still not healing, there's a good chance that your nervous system dysregulation could be a big block within that process. And so, no amount of healing can happen if you're not in that rest and digest phase, which is kind of the parasympathetic aspect of our body. And so we can have chronic stress, we can have trauma, we can have like these heavy emotions that really keep the body suppressed in its ability to heal, but also inflamed. And the immune system thereby is on high alert. So healing really begins when the body can feel safe. And I can attest to this with even the last month. My healing has taken a substantial turn in the right direction because I finally was able to allow my nervous system to significantly reset in a way that I hadn't been able to do. And so if you've ever said, like, I know what to do, I just don't do it, or I know what to do, I'm doing it, it's not working, this episode is for you because chances are it's not necessarily that it's a mindset issue, but it's a nervous system issue. And these things all tie together. So it is the chicken or egg discussion of, is the mindset creating the nervous system dysregulation? And it gets nuanced, which we'll dive into that further. But the moment you realize, how to tap into your own nervous system regulation, your pendulum is going to swing substantially into a healing energy.
Yep. I think this is one of those healing blocks that maybe is starting to come online a little bit more, but it's one that wasn't talked about for a long time, especially being on this journey for 20 years. I this is something that's really occurred to me in the last 5. So as I was entering my 40s, I started to really kind of go, huh, like all the things that I did aren't doing it for me anymore. So a lot of people, when they start on this journey, myself included, yourself included, even though I think you were arguably a little bit ahead of me because your journey and my journey on this started around the same time in 2020 with this aspect, but you were there first. It took me a while to learn. Most people focus on their food, their detox, their supplements, and they get stuck. Sometimes they don't get stuck right away. Like they see this huge shift and then they plateau and they get stuck. So we mentioned this in another episode. Nutraceuticals are big business. They are big money. And while I align more with that, I kind of sit in the middle of, it's just another way to, feed greedy capitalism and take
Mhm.
advantage of people that are at a loss. So that's why we're talking about this, because we're talking about that other missing link. So food detox supplements, we're not saying they're bad. We're just saying there's this other aspect. So your missing link truly is your nervous system. Your nervous system is what allows you to digest. It's what allows your organ function to relax. So when your nervous system is all ramped up, everything kind of constricts. Your blood flow doesn't go to your organs. It's not thinking about resting and digesting. We're not doing that. We're thinking about freezing. We're thinking about running. We're thinking about fighting. We're trying to stay safe. So we're not in that flow state. Think of it like a flow state where you just experience this on a vacation. Like you were able to kind of relax and suddenly, whoa, I can eat food that really bothered me when I'm living in the grind, right? So if your body is living in this fight or flight, or we could call it sympathetic dominance, healing is seen as a threat. So picture yourself being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. The last thing you're going to think to do is stop and meditate. You're going to keep running. And unfortunately, our body doesn't know the difference in a way between the ding of our email going off and, being chased by a man-eating animal. So we're not in this state where we get to heal as often as maybe our ancestors a long time ago when life was a lot slower, when the environment was a lot less packed full of things. So our chronic stress is equaling chronic inflammation, which is equaling chronic illness. It's the process of getting to dis-ease. We are not in ease. We are not in flow. And why that happens is, like you said, it's nuanced. In some situations, it's truly that you're living in this state of just hypervigilance. You're always on the go. You're always trying to, feed your ego, which is what it really is. Like, I got to keep up. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And it's just keeping your body so out of alignment. Um, Definitely been there. You've been there. And then there's other causes, like you going on a vacation. For me, it was finally looking at, the chicken and egg situation of, let's see, I'm meditating, I'm doing the breath work, I'm doing all this, but my life is what my life is. And my autoimmune disease just continued to flare because of my hormonal shifts. And so I had to approach it from a different way, which is allowing me that same relief that you're getting. And that's why we talk about there's more than one way to get here, but
Mhm.
we still have to think about all of it. So the state of your nervous system is going to determine whether your body is in survival mode or healing mode. And guess what? You don't get to be in both simultaneously.
Yeah, and it's wild. I remember working with a provider, gosh, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and she had used muscle testing to determine sympathetic dominance or parasympathetic. And at that point, I was testing for 90% sympathetic dominance, meaning that my body was so far in that fight flight that there was no balance. Like the pendulum was so far in the direction of being chased by the tiger.
Mm.
And I was testing like that for a very long time. And I would argue even until the last month or so, my body was still heavily in that sympathetic dominance. And you hit the nail on the head. We are one of the realizations I had, and it's funny because I recognized in looking at my patterns that I exist and I've created a life where that is my reality. And that's my own choosing unknowingly. I think it's a matter of the society we live in where we are slaves to our phones, we're slaves to email, we're constantly on some kind of like a Zoom platform, or we're getting inundated with information, whether it's through social media, through podcasting, YouTube, whatever. And that's just the electronic stimulation. I'm not even talking about all the sports people have their children in, like the completely crazy schedules we lead from sun up to sundown. It's so unnatural. And in all of that, we are highly disconnected from nature, which we are creatures of nature. We are of this earth, and we are so disconnected from the natural rhythms of earth. And so, ironically, in my overstimulated state, was listening to a podcast, which further overstimulates me, right? Is I just am inundated by information and I love to learn. So I justified it as, well, I'm learning. This is great. Like I love to take in information. And the podcast was talking about how we just overconsume everywhere we go. And I was like, oof, I feel called out. Like here I am listening to a podcast calling me out when the podcast itself is also creating this overstimulation. And I looked at my routine and I was like, oh my God, from the second I wake up, I have my face in a book. And then I'll do some meditation or mindfulness, but then I work out and then I go shower. And while I'm showering and getting ready, I have the podcast back on. I'm learning more. And then I'm, managing my kids' morning, and then I jump into meetings, and there's never like a freaking time of silence. And I don't think that I'm unusual in that. I think that's how we've been conditioned. And so it was kind of in the irony of listening to that podcast that I was like, ooh, I got to take inventory of where I can cut some of this out. And again, you don't make room for healing, but also for divine guidance when you're in that chronic state of high stress. And even though it may not seem on the surface stressful, it's very unnatural for the body. We're not meant to take in thousands and thousands, if not millions of bits of information every single day. It's highly abnormal to be inundated as we are. So I'll go into more. I'd love to talk more about my personal kind of epiphanies throughout this podcast. But I want to kind of stay focused here on the science too, so we can understand, I'm a very analytical person. When I understand the science, I can understand why I need to make changes. If I don't have that why, it's hard for me to actually take action. So as you mentioned, Jess, we have the autonomic nervous system, which encompasses two kind of branches. The sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And then we have the parasympathetic, which is our rest, digest, and repair. Ideally, there should be a balance between the two. You're going to have times where in your morning routine, you might be more in that sympathetic dominance because you need the energy to get going for your day. You need to get through a workout, or maybe you have a meeting that you need to be focused on. That sympathetic dominance is what's going to allow you the focus to do that. So it's not bad, but you also need that downtime where you can have that kind of just re-regulation aspect, that quietness of the mind, that gentle mindful walk, whatever it is. And so again, that parasympathetic is more of that rest, digest, and repair. And now, how you know if you're like sympathetic dominant, you might have a lot of signs of anxiety. A lot of IBS, actually all IBS, they've determined is psychological. It's a stress response. And so whether that's you're drinking too much alcohol, you're living under chronic stress, you're going to notice it in your bowel motility. Either you're like not absorbing stuff and you're, having a lot of diarrhea or loose stools, or your motility slows. And that was me, a sign I had was my motility slowed. And I would feel really full fast. Like I couldn't eat enough calories because I just felt sick. And so, some people have the opposite where they comfort eat. I couldn't eat. Like when I'm in that very high level of stress, my body does not want food. So a lot of people, especially those that are in the autoimmune community or suffering with some kind of unknown symptoms, have a really strong imbalance with their parasympathetic sympathetic dominance. So the state, is most people chronically ill are stuck in that survival state, basically. And it's not because they're weak. It's because, again, we're existing in a time where this is highly unnatural for us to be on all the time, constantly accessible. And so one of the things I educate my clients on quite often is the vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve connects from our brain, goes down to our heart, kind of heart area, into our gut, and that impacts our immune system. And so it's kind of like this brake pedal, essentially, where the stronger your vagus tone is, the easier it is to shift into that parasympathetic response. So when people talk about doing box breathing or 4-7-8 breath work or different variations of like nervous system control, what they're doing is activating that vagus nerve, which basically gets the body into that state of calm, which is a great thing. And so when people have what we call poor vagal tone, as I mentioned, we have slower digestion, we have poor heart rate variability, we have a poor immunity, so we're more sick more often, and also high anxiety. There's a very physiological aspect of anxiety. For me, when I got into this work 5 years ago, Jess mentioned I was a little ahead of the curve. But what I recognized in 2020 was the anxiety I dealt with was very much a mindset thing. And it was how I perceived threats in the world. I perceive that threats were everywhere. And that fed into all the anxiety that my brain was spitting out, reinforcing that the world wasn't safe. And so there are chemical imbalances that can lead to anxiety for sure, or poor gut health. But I think for the predominant number of people, it's actually a mindset component. Like you have to learn to train your mind. It's the pinnacle of everything in your life. When you master your mind, everything else becomes easier. So that's kind of the vagus nerve and why that's important to understand. And then we have the limbic system, which is where we hold essentially that emotional memory. And then that's also the place where we detect patterns, right? So if I, as a child, was chased by a Rottweiler, I might assume in my brain, this is subconscious, so not consciously, but my brain might associate all dogs with a threat. So every time I see a dog walking, my heart rate might increase. I might start to get clammy hands. I might start to feel a little anxious and like just ugh. And even though it's not the same dog that attacked, the brain recognizes a pattern. Hey, that's a dog. Thereby, all dogs are threats, right? And so it's a good thing because we don't want to have to figure out if every single element of our life is safe always. Our brain starts to generalize, as it's called, but it can become problematic because we can generalize that our work is a threat. And thereby, every time we have to wake up to go to work, our body goes into fight flight. Or even foods, that was something that you and I have talked about is I had a very strong association with specific foods causing autoimmunity or specific triggering things creating symptoms for me. And that's very subconscious. And thereby, you almost kind of manifest symptoms. The more your brain is wired to look for those threats, the more you're going to create those circumstances. So again, that past trauma, and again, trauma can be anything, right? For me, it was the trauma of 2020 set my body on a trajectory of severe dysregulation. And there were patterns before that definitely fed into that reality, but it was like the breaking point was 2020 for me. And then everything became a threat. So your brain then looks at that as like these false danger signals that keep the body on high alert. Even though, we know what we know about COVID now, we know the world is different in this point now that those threats, the looming threats are kind of gone. That body memory, that cellular memory is very active for many, many people. And so, again, as I mentioned, we can have these trained responses. For me, food was one of them. Situational, we can have these like trained things in our mind, and they're all subconscious. So, at no point is this like a fault of yours, or any of the listeners. This is how the brain is taking in data and saying, hey, remember that one time that you had peanuts and you had an anaphylactic reaction? Thereby, forever going forward, this is a scary food. And that is something that's good, right? If you had an anaphylactic reaction, you don't want to like start eating things that are going to cause your body harm. But sometimes it can be a heightened state of alert or stress that creates a reaction that thereby we generalize everything in that genre as unsafe. And so again, a peanut reaction, like don't eat that if you have anaphylactic stuff. But one of the things that, as a side note, my oldest son has an anaphylactic peanut allergy. And we opted to do oral desensitization therapy. Well, in his brain for so long, we started when he was about, I think, 5 or 6. And, since 13 months, we've told him basically, like peanuts can make us sick. So we avoid them. We don't have food made around peanuts, anywhere near peanuts. And it was a very like walking on eggshell life for us as parents and for him too, because there's a looming threat everywhere. And it's terrifying as a parent when your little one can't yet express how they're feeling. And every, puke episode they have, it's like, oh my God, did they eat something? When it's normal childhood illness, right? So we all had a lot of conditioning around peanuts as well. So when we decided to do therapy for him, I ended up doing hypnotherapy while he was sleeping. I recorded some audios helping his brain reassociate with that his body can tolerate this in the doses that he's receiving, that he's safe to ingest this. His body knows how to respond in a way that's helpful for him to build immunity. Because I had to like undo the wiring, right? Because if I'm going to give someone something that formerly created an anaphylactic reaction, even at micro doses, he's gotten a strong association, which can again further manifest symptoms. And for the most part, it went without a hitch. Our overall experience was great, but it was terrifying. So again, like even that unlearning, I think a lot of people with autoimmune, we have to unlearn symptoms because they're very real in our body. And so the body does hold on to that. So, you know, the body is not overreacting though. I just want to like kind of eagle eye view this for a second. The body's not overreacting. It's reacting in the way it was trained to do so. And as I mentioned, like with my son with the hypnosis audios, I was helping him retrain those associations so that something that was previously very threatening is now something that can support him and having a much more rich life where he can enjoy a lot of other things. And that can be, copied and pasted to every other kind of association we have within our body, right? Is we want to be able to retrain the brain that we are safe. And it takes time. My modality is hypnosis. I'm a huge believer in that. But there are other ways that you can kind of retrain the body through desensitization therapy, exposure therapy, meditation, prayer, like mindfulness. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. My favorite and fastest is just hypnosis.
Yep. And this is just trauma. I mean, this is trauma, like the big T, little t trauma. All of this is just trauma. And I think we also have this conception of what trauma really is. But if we just look at trauma from that very high viewpoint, it is just a pattern wiring within our system. And that's why you can see people who have had bad events happen in their life continue to have bad events happen in their life because their pattern becomes that trauma. So, trauma and stress create chronic inflammation. And again, Angie, what you do, even with your own kids, with yourself, we're in this time period in history where collectively everybody went through 2020. We have a lot of generational trauma, and we have a ton of autoimmune disease. This is not a surprise. I mean, one equals the other. Our bodies get stuck in this wired pattern, and it just keeps circulating. I've been there, I've done it. So, what happens in like situations of emotional trauma? I've had a ton of emotional trauma, and I'm just, I had autoimmune before autoimmune was even known. I swear I had this as a child, and I can reflect back on it, but there was a ton of emotional trauma, a ton of it. And there was very little I could do as a child. But now as an adult, I get to rewire that. I get to work on that pattern. So, really understanding that emotional trauma equals cortisol dysregulation. So, your cortisol is your stress hormone. It's a hormone that, we want it to rise during the day and fall at night. We want it to help us stay awake and aware and mobile during the day, and we want it to crash out a little bit at night so we can sleep and rest and digest. A lot of us are inverted, and a lot of that is emotional trauma. So, cortisol dysregulation, which impacts our body in a myriad of ways. And there's signals um, that create like immune suppression. So, if you're somebody who goes through like a very traumatic event, and then you notice that your throat gets sore, or you like maybe your rings don't fit anymore, right? You start to get kind of puffy, you feel just inflamed. That's your immune system saying, hey, we have a problem. You might even notice that your lymph nodes swell in different spaces and areas of your body. Those are all just really good indicators. So if you get sick a lot, but if you notice like, ooh, I just went through a highly emotional event, or I'm really stressed out and now my throat hurts, that's always my sign. I up my antioxidants. I practice chilling out. I rest. I rest as soon as I feel that. Because what happens next is your gut breaks down. And again, we talked about what happens when we get into that state of panic, anxiety, constriction. We don't get the blood flow to our gut system. And that vagus nerve that Angie was talking about, that's that highway between our brain and our gut. It just shuts off. We're not doing that anymore. So we start to get maybe like some people just can't eat. I would eat. I had like the opposite thing, but it didn't help me because I didn't feel good. But it's like my body was trying to do something to get something that it needed, the calm, and a lot of it was dopamine or whatever. But then when we do that for a certain amount of time, now we're in that autoimmune world where we have two things happening, in my opinion. We have this loop of brain wiring happening, so we're replaying the same recording over and over again. And our body is suffering the consequences. So we're having this also break down, our gut motility. We're having it break down blood flow to our important organs. So two things are happening. And then they just keep feeding each other over and over again. And we just end up in this loop. So one thing I really want people to reflect on, because I think it's really important, especially our generation. I'm a Gen X. I think you're millennial. I think these are really important generations, and it's helping our children now. We need to talk about adverse childhood experiences. They refer to that as ACEs, if you've ever heard of it. And we want to talk about it because when we can reflect back on our past, not that we want to live and relive our past, but when we can reflect back and really acknowledge, like, yeah, I maybe was living in a hypervigilant state, or, whatever it was, recognize the unhealthy patterns that you might have been living in. You can see that your risk increased for things like autoimmune disease. Maybe it's chronic pain, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, addiction. And addiction comes in lots of forms. We can have addiction to food, alcohol, recreational drugs, shopping, sex. I mean, addictions come in all these forms. And again, they're because we're not getting the chemical balance that we need. It's that dopamine, it's that feeling of being in control. So we have to think about addiction in that sense too. And then the big one that I think we're all starting to feel, millennials, my generation, these hormonal imbalances. We're starting to enter those years where the toll that our hormones paid early on for living in this pattern that we actually thought was normal, we thought that was normal life, is now starting to show up. And it's going, yeah, we're going to have to do something different here, vastly different. So, all those experiences as a child can probably be brought back to what you're experiencing now. And the reason we want to talk about it is because we as humans just store all these events right in our body. If you haven't read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it's fantastic because all those things are just stored. They're just locked in here. So, like grief, a lot of times people feel like a shortness of breath. It's undealt with grief. Always, always grief. You can usually trace it right back to something that you know of, but it could be generational too. So we have to just really recognize that, because once we recognize it, we can start addressing it. A lot of people do the talk therapies and stuff like that. And I really think we're shifting out of that. I think people who know that talk therapy maybe has a small space, but you're never going to get to the end of that tunnel in talk therapy alone, because all you're doing is re-signaling these patterns in yourself. And this is the hard work. It doesn't just live in the mind. It lives in our body. So we really have to think about that somatic approach. What are we doing with our body? What are we doing to truly heal? And Angie and I have done a lot of different things, and they all just tick away at some of these events, but I have not yet just been like, that's the silver bullet. So if you're seeing stuff online where it's like, this is the way, please believe me, the destination is the journey with this. There is no, you don't just reach the highest peak of this mountain. You break away pieces at a time, and you will have to be in pain to do it. You have to deal with it, because that's how you release it. So that's important to knock down the chronic inflammation and disease.
Yeah, and it's so huge, and I just wanna take a side tangent quick on the ACE scores. Is you can go online and Google, like, calculate my ACE score, and it's calculated from 0 to 10, and it's based on life events that you may have gone through in the realm of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. So anything with a score of 2 or above is correlated to a higher chance of disease. 4 or above is correlated almost directly to chronic disease, autoimmunity, etc. So, when I did mine, I think I had like a score of 7 or 8. I mean, the majority of things that I could have dealt with, I did. And I don't say that with a, oh, woe is me, but I say that with a, yeah, no wonder my body's screaming out with dysregulation, dysfunction, dis-ease, is that there was a lot of traumatic things I experienced. And all of us have our story. And if you resonate with The Body Keeps the Score, it's a fantastic book. It's really science heavy. One I actually like even more that I found is called It Didn't Start With You. And it's basically like the Cliff Notes version of The Body Keeps the Score, but really helping you understand exactly what you spoke to, how generationally we hold stuff in our systems, how, we go through events that manifest in our body. And again, it's not to say we need to rehash the past over and over, but to say, how do we transcend that? And that's when I let go of therapy and started doing, receiving life coaching and doing hypnotherapy. I was sick of basically kind of rehashing my stories and then having people basically agree with why my life was difficult and why I was a victim. I didn't need that. I needed, like, how do I move through this? Like, and I think there are some fantastic therapists out there who get that. But when I was going through all of this, I didn't have any of that kind of support. And I kept tire spinning and I never felt better. And I spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, doing the weekly therapy thing when in a course of a 12-week program, with my first coach and hypnotherapist, it changed my life. And that's what you and I think attest to with this work is that there's not a silver bullet, but there are things that can be monumentally helpful within your healing journey. But it also starts with an awareness, and are you willing to give up the story of victimhood, right? I could sit here and say, oh my God, my ACE score is 7. Woe is me. Life is hard. Or I could be like, yeah, that happened. How can I move through it? How can I help people with what I've learned? And that's, I think, what a lot of us are being called to do is heal, show others what's possible, and then be empowered to make a difference. So on that note, what are some you probably, if you're on this podcast, you are probably very intuitive with your body, with things that are happening around you. So this might be, this might go without saying, but what are some of the signs that you're dysregulated? And I even got caught up in it and didn't realize how bad it had gotten recently. So, some of the things that I've dealt with, but this may resonate for you, is that hyperproductivity. Like I would get laser focused on stuff and go balls to the walls and then just crash and burn and then feel even worse. And I would do that with working out. Like, oh my God, I feel so good today. I'm going to do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Cause I like routine. I like routine. I like consistency. And then I would burn myself out and I would just completely trash my hormones. So yours might be in the realm of working. It might be, volunteering for all the things with your kids. It might look different, but hyperproductivity. And then you kind of have that like weekend crash, or as you said, you have a moment to breathe and you get really freaking sick. That's also very, very common. Another dysregulated sign is people pleasing and perfectionism. Been there, done that. Like that's a very classic sign of someone also who's chronically dysregulated is just needing to have things perfect, fear of failure, fear of not looking glossy and put together. Um, and then, oof, this one is huge for me as well, is the inability to relax without guilt. I remember texting you. I've texted you many a times. Like, I know I should be doing this stuff, but I just can't today. And you're my person that's like, hey, it's okay, take a break. I'm getting better at giving myself that permission, but that unconscious guilt for productivity is incredible. And that's a cultural thing that is so American. Like other cultures, I think of kind of more of the European cultures, even Mexican cultures, they take siestas. They don't rush. Like even Southern, my brother lives in Louisiana and they just kind of go with this flow. And for a Northern person like me, I'm like, oh my God, hurry up. I got shit to do. But they're just like slow and go with the flow and there's no rush. And it's it's a conditioning thing. It's very much a cultural thing for us to not be able to stop and again feel guilty. So give yourself that permission to, even if you feel like you're air quote not productive, who the hell cares? Take a break. If your body's screaming for it, and that's what I see with chronic fatigue patients is, this desire to push through, push through, push through, but your body is telling you so desperately to stop. And I understand that as a mother, as a business person, all this, sometimes there are things you just have to do because you've got to get money, you've got to do whatever. But there's also a lot of benefit in just taking time to breathe, taking a vacation, getting away. And you and I have financed our healing. Like I will be the first to fucking say, I did not have a nest egg with which I could afford all the things I've done. I wish I did. That'd be great. But I've had to put stuff on credit cards. And now, mind you, I've intelligently done it with 0% credit cards. If you can, that's the way to go. So you can pay it off by the time interest hits. But like, if you have to finance your life for a few months so you can heal, fucking do it because there will always be time to work. But if you don't take that time, you will continue to spiral further and further and further into dis-ease to the point where you might wind up with cancer, a heart attack, a stroke. Like there are so many worse things than the beginning phases of autoimmune or chronic fatigue. Um, so another sign there, another thing that I've dealt with all of these. So I've like, as I've made a list, I'm like, these are all very personal to me, but they probably resonate and they're all signs of dysfunction is increasing anxiety. And then also a hyper focus on health symptoms. That has been such a classic thing for me. And it's very, again, very real when your body's, providing you symptoms, it's real and very hard not to get fixated on them and then kind of hyper focus and want to solve the problem. And then you get more focus, which makes the symptoms even worse because you're literally manifesting more of that. And so I tell my clients, if you deal with anxiety and you begin to work through anxiety, it's like whack-a-mole. It's going to pop up in your health. It's going to pop up with your kids. It's going to pop up with your friendships or other relationships. Like Anxiety will get your attention in any avenue it can, and one of the most frightening ways is through your health, because that's a very visceral survival thing, is if you don't have your health, your ego knows, like, "Shit, like, I might be dying then." So, if you notice you're kind of fixating on those things, that's also a sign you're very dysregulated. Another thing I've also dealt with, a lot of high achievers, and I think perfectionists do, is the all or nothing mentality, and that's something that since 2020 I've had to really break, is it's okay if I don't get a full workout in, I'm just gonna go for a walk today. It's okay if I don't perfect that social media post, it's good enough. It's okay if I don't send the email in the exact wording I want to and I regret it later. Like, I'm not gonna stew on this for long. I'm gonna let it go. So being able to just not have that all or nothing mentality, even around food, how many people will like do a crash diet and then go completely all in and then fall off the wagon because it's not sustainable. It's balance. And I know that's so hard. Like, I used to say I'm a very black and white person. That is how I'm wired, is very like black and white. It's very ingrained in me. However, I have had to learn to reprogram my brain to have balance because it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable to live with an all or nothing mentality, whether it's around your food, around your routines, your relationships, expectations. Like, it's not. You have to work on that. And that's, you and I talk about this all the time. It's in real time that these changes happen. You have an experience come up, a life challenge, and in that exact moment, you're like, oh shit, here's an opportunity. What road am I going to take? Am I going to go down the road I've always done, which is black and white, all or nothing? Or am I going to hold some compassion for myself and be like, okay, well, I can do what I can do today, and that's fine. So, these are all things that are just, again, to keep you aware. Maybe they resonate. If they don't, you probably have others on your list of ways that you're dysregulated. We can go into physical things too, increased like insomnia. People can have a lot of troubles with sleeping. You can have a lot of hair loss. I mean, there's so many physical symptoms you can have with dysregulation too: elevated heart rate, sweaty, you stink more, like all these other things. So those are just a couple things. And again, you probably have some more. So let us know in the comments what yours are if you notice those. And to kind of bring it back to this whole, compassion for self, you're not lazy. Like, you are literally maxed out. The body does not need, in cases like this, more discipline. It literally needs to learn and be reminded of more safety. And I read the book, I don't even know what it's called, by David Goggins. Do you remember the title of the book? Never Give Up or something, or some
Can't hurt me
Can't Hurt
or
Me. Yep,
some
that one. I
yeah.
will say that's, if you're learning discipline and you're just trying to like figure out how to discipline yourself, that's a fine book. I think otherwise it's toxic as hell, because he pushes through the limits of what any human should do. Now that's, again, for a man who like is channeling his trauma into something, fine. If that's a healthier outlet to you than drinking yourself stupid, sure. I think that mentality though is so fucking toxic, and the reason why so many people are as chronically ill as they are is because of mentality like that. Like, you have to go at all costs. That's not how we are designed. And there's a natural rhythm to life where there's a time where you push and there's a time where you let off the gas. And it's that where you need to discern what's right for you. No one can tell you if you're being lazy or if you need a break. You have to discern that for yourself. So I just needed to put that in there because it, like, even the 75 hard challenges, there's so many ways where I'm like, God, this shit's toxic for us to like do and feel like we should be able to live at these standards. It's not normal. So don't think that you're not achieving enough or doing enough or should be able to do all these other things. We're not designed to do that. And that further reinforces in your body that it is not safe.
Yeah, I had read that book by David Goggins. I That was a lot of my life. I can willpower my way through anything, and so much so that I got rhabdo in, I think it was 2014, doing, extreme CrossFit. And it I tore, big tears, macro tears in my lats. And it should have put me on dialysis, but it took me out for a really long time. But here's the kicker. Even though I couldn't even open a door and I had swelled up so much I couldn't even wear my bras, I still went back and did more while in that condition. I went for jogs because I just thought it was lactic acid.
Mm.
So this is that mentality that probably did a number on me. And I think of books like that where For one person that may not be the end of the world, but it's the message that it sends to people that you're not enough if you don't push through the hard stuff. I love that we're having this discussion because sometimes we need to sit through the hard stuff.
And I just
Sometimes.
want to, for the listeners who don't know what rhabdo is, rhabdomyolysis, which is basically where your muscles break down faster than your body can handle. And so you release like myoglobin, all these different things in your body, which creates essentially like a shock to your system. Your kidneys start to fail, like you have just insane amounts of inflammation. And that can happen from extreme sports, and that can happen from pushing yourself. I mean, people get it. Unfortunately, it's not super uncommon, but it's a result of complete overexertion. And
Yeah.
again, as you said, like it could kill you. And that's the
Mhm.
kind of shit that David Goggins speaks to, that I'm like, this is toxic. This is not, I mean, if you read his book, you'll see how crazy he is. Like I think he's a great guy, and he's got some good empowering messages of overcoming trauma. And that's what I like, I think, right, is how to channel that trauma into a way that is inspiring, but that's to the extreme, and I can't get down with that because that's very toxic. But if you see the injuries he has in his training, it's unbelievable what he pushes through. And he, I think at some points ended up in the hospital and then still fucking went out and did shit. And I'm like,
He had broken limbs and he had torn hands, and I mean he was a Navy SEAL. So, okay, let's just keep it in context, right? I do want those people that are out there doing the hard stuff to be able to do that, I guess. But this is not a you and me everyday type situation, and especially for women. And I don't mean to exclude the men, but for women, we are not men. Men are built to get lean and muscular under stress. That's what they're built to do. Women are built to bear children, and we're built to store fat, and we're built in that sense. And so it's not that we can't do hard stuff, but our hard stuff looks different than
yeah.
that
And
part.
well, it does. And if it's okay, Jess, I'll talk about at the next section about the tools to regulate nervous system, because there are some things that we're advised to do as women that are also very toxic. And one of the things that's getting huge attention right now is cold plunges. That is the worst thing you can do as a woman, especially when you have a dysregulated nervous system. Now, I'm not talking about like a quick cold shower. Like if you want to take your warm shower, notch it to cold for like a few seconds to kind of help your body, that can be good, or like a cold splash of water to your face. But these ice plunges that people are doing and promoting are so bad for a dysregulated nervous system because it shocks the body and it keeps you in that fight flight. It tells your body we need survival. We need to like throw on all of our resources because the body can't handle this level of cold. So, again, keeping you in fight flight to preserve life. And so, again, if you're someone who is dealing with adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, any kind of autoimmune where you're just kind of maxed and your cup is empty, please do not do cold plunges. And that also goes to extreme heat. So you have to, this is something I learned as well. When I was in a really high state of adrenal fatigue, and even in the last month or two, I couldn't do saunas for very long because that was too stressful for my body. And how I knew was I was starting to get insomnia really bad. And my little, or I have an Aura ring. And if you don't have one, go get one if you want to understand your body. And we don't get paid for that promotion. I just really believe in the product, but my ring metrics would show my body was extremely stressed. And so even doing a sauna for an extended period of time is not ideal. So maybe you want to do like 20 or 30 minutes to get the benefits of detox, but you don't want to be doing it for an hour because again, that's signaling to your body stress, and it's too high stress in that state. So you also have to know where you are in your healing journey. For me, there was a point literally a month ago I couldn't even walk a mile. My body was that stressed. And I was getting MCAS, like a mast cell activation histamine symptoms from it. And that's, again, my nervous system was just so dysregulated that a simple mile walk was too much for my body. And I had to understand what that was. Typically, I'd tell people, like, yes, go have a mindful walk. It's great for you. But I couldn't do even the most basic things. So some of these things you have to discern for yourself. Like, can my body handle this? You and I talk a lot too about fasting. There's a huge movement for fasting, for autophagy, to, basically eliminate what they call senescent cells, which are the zombie cells that they believe create disease. Fantastic for a healthy body to do a 24-hour fast to get an autophagy, or maybe a 72-hour fast. where you and I have been in our healing, that's detrimental. I think right now I'm at a place where I could probably do a 24-hour fast. But beyond that, that's also a stressor on the body. And so if you need resources around that and you're curious about the benefits of fasting, Mindy Pels wrote a book called Fast Like a Girl because a lot of fasts are based on men and their physiology. So we have to look at women's hormones, the ideal fasting windows, when our bodies can tolerate it, when they can't. And if you're perimenopause and you have an irregular cycle, she addresses that. If you're menopausal and you don't have a cycle, she addresses that. If you have adrenal fatigue or autoimmune, she addresses how to do those things in the context of that. So you got to be careful because a lot of these recommendations are really for dudes and they're
Yeah.
for people that aren't, as dysregulated as where we've been.
Yeah.
Um, but some of the things that you can do that are generally safe, again, mindful breath work. You probably don't want to do trance inducing psychedelic breath work with long holds. That's going to also activate your sympathetic nervous system. But focus gentle breathing, and maybe you can talk about the breath work you like, because I know that you're very into that. That seems like it's been very helpful for you. So maybe you can talk, if it's okay, about a couple of things that you've found helpful with nervous system regulation.
Yeah, there's a lot of different breath work out there. And with me, like one of my earliest signs that my system was really starting to fall apart was the shortness of breath. I actually went into the doctor several times thinking that I had maybe a lung infection or something. I had so much air hunger. And that's when I started to understand this whole mind body connection. I was definitely a chest breather. So one thing, I have a friend who taught yoga and I would go to her studio once a week and just work on the somatics. And she was teaching me how to, she had to teach me how to breathe. Um, so if you're a chest breather, if you put your hands on your chest and you take a deep breath and you feel your chest really push out and you feel like you need to inhale through your mouth, it's a good sign that you're in like this heightened state. Your shoulders are probably locked up. You're probably really just tight and constricted. So when I learned about breath work, it's the belly breathing. It's your ability to inhale through your nose and exhale through your nose and feel your tummy go out with the inhale and suck back in with the exhale. And that's where you want to focus. And sometimes it takes you really needing to like hold a hand there, really be able to see it. You might even need somebody to touch that because you may not have engaged that for so long. So that's the first thing I want to say. Like if you find yourself chronically breathing through your mouth, you're probably in a state where you're not even getting enough oxygen to your organs anyways, and it's keeping you in more of a stress state. So when people start to panic, they start to hyperventilate. It's the same thing. So with breath work, I do love the box breathing. So if you don't know what box breathing is, it's you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. So I think of it like a line. So I inhale for 4 seconds, and then at the top, I hold for 4 seconds, and then I exhale through my nose for 4 seconds, and then I hold for 4 seconds. That's why they call it a box. That one's really nice. They use that one in the military branches. Men and women use this before they go into high stress situations, brings them back into their body. It's a great way to just kind of regulate your body. The 4-7-8. So the nice part about a 4-7-8 is we're not getting into the extremes of breath holding, but we want to inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, and then we hold that for 7 seconds. And the key is to exhale a little bit longer than our hold. And there's variations of this. I do one that's like, um, you know, I think it's like 7 seconds in, I hold for 9, I exhale for 11. I can go a little further, but I've been doing breath work for a while. There's different types of breath work where you do, different portions of inhale. So belly, chest through your nose, and then you sigh it out through your mouth. That's really good for just like getting you into a state of calm. So I love breath work, but I think it's really important just to notice how you're breathing first. Do you feel like it's in your chest or are you through your belly? Because they feel very different, and just practice it. I'm really mindful of it and I catch myself, and I'll just go lay in the grass even. It's summer here and I'll do that. Which brings me to grounding. And I know, Angie, you and I talk a little bit about grounding. You do a lot of grounding. She's a tree hugger. But getting barefoot in the soil, I mean, there is really nothing better. I love to just be on the ground, and I don't like bugs or anything, but to me it's totally worth it. I'll just lay there and face the sky and just breathe. It's so calming to my system. And I know I have animals and stuff, so I'm outside a lot. But I notice like my dog, she gets really interested in what I'm doing. Like she's feeling it. There's a lot of yawning. So energetically, it's really good for that system. Angie talked about the cold exposure. I agree. Putting your already stressed out body into like a state of high stress, that's no different than like going for a hard workout when you're already stressed, or doing something that's really stressful. But I do love a good cold splash. I will crank my shower over to cold for 10 or 15 seconds and then bring it back to warm and let my body get cozy again. I like that. But this extreme stuff, we've got to really, really think about what we're actually doing to our body. It's not fun when we start to get sick from it. And it just takes one traumatic event really to kind of push an autoimmune situation into a full on flare. Movement. I was a workout junkie for a long time too. Um, a gym rat, obviously got rhabdo. Angie explained what that is. I now am a yoga doer. I do yoga outside in the sunshine, usually right away in the morning. It is so energizing to my body. And I just like to feel that stretch and I get some of that strength, but it's just me. I'll incorporate some weights every now and then or some bands to give myself a little extra. Walking. I I feel like I got out of that for a while because I was a runner for a long time. I still like to jog, but walking and even putting in like a walking meditation or nothing at all, to me it's a reset. It's a reset I need a lot. I know Angie does rebounding, any kind of like somatics where you're moving your body, you can shake it out, pushing against things, that kind of stuff. It's all important for helping your body release because we talked about how things get stored. We can help it release, and we can do that somatically. But the lymph drainage, there's a lot of physical things. Beyond that, Angie is a hypnotherapist, mindset, she does all that stuff. This is this is the other work that we do. So we have that motion and movement work, the physical things, but then we have these things where we're having to go and hear a little bit more into our mind. So hypnotherapy, reprogramming our subconscious fear loops, installing a safety-based identity, and it takes practice and it takes time because it's not enough to just say it or look at it. You kind of have to think about like what would that look like for me, and then I got to feel it. So it's kind of getting yourself there. Somatic tracking, noticing like the physical sensations in your body and being curious versus getting into the panic state. I'm short of breath. Like what could that be telling me? Well, my lungs are there, my heart is there. Like, ooh, I feel that maybe when I think about somebody I miss. It's grief. So instead of thinking I'm having a heart attack, we could really kind of go to the core of it.
Well, metaphor, make it metaphorical too. And I did this, I was driving to a meeting, was in my car, and I was reflecting on because I had noticed I had more shortness of breath in the last few months, which is so unusual for me. And again, completely related to nervous system dysregulation, trauma, etc. And I'm like, what does that feel like? And I'm like, it feels like an elephant sitting on my chest. So I did this myself. And this is something you can do, which is why I'm talking about this really quick. And I'm sorry, this is getting long, but this is such a good episode that I really want you to walk away with tangible things. So for me, I'm like, okay, what does it feel like? First of all, where is it? It's in my chest. Okay. What does it feel like in my chest? And I'm like, it's heavy. Okay, what does that feel like? Like an elephant sitting on my chest. What do I want to do? I want to run away from it. I want to get away from this. And it's funny because running, hit workouts, fast movement used to be my cope. Now I've learned through the school of hard knocks, I get to sit with it. I don't get to run, I get to sit. But it's interesting because my default was, I want to run from this. I want to get away from this feeling. And so if you're having symptoms, get curious. What does it feel like? Where is it? What do I want to do? What does it remind me of? When was the last time I felt this way? When was the first time I noticed that? What was happening around that time? And, what do I wish could have happened instead? You're kind of doing some inner child work too with that, but it's really fascinating what information you'll get from yourself doing your own self interview. And again, if it's, metaphor is such a strong way that the brain works is through metaphor. And so the more we can kind of put it into like a story, we can also be like, well, what would feel better for me? Well, if I could put like something around the elephant to lead it off my chest, just sit with it. Talked about sitting with our grief, our struggles, or whatever. I want to sit with it and understand it. What does it need to tell me? And you may not know. It may not consciously come through, but what if it could speak? What would it say? And you kind of just keep poking and prodding. So that's a great way to do your own somatic work, on yourself because it's there. And if you're someone like Jess and I, we were very disconnected from our bodies for a very long time. And it took having to slow down, which wasn't our choice. Like we got bitch slapped by the universe to slow down. And the signs were getting louder and louder. And now we can understand these things more, but everybody can do this. Everybody can localize where symptoms are coming from, what they're trying to tell you. And even you can go so far as, or even not super far, but the right side pertains to masculine energy, the left is feminine. And so if you're having something on the left side, all right, this is the feminine side. What's happening here? Well, I'm having wrist pain. Okay, am I doing something too much, within, or do I need more attention to the feminine? Am I working a little too hard, or masculine? Am I pushing too hard in the masculine and I have to rebalance? So you can kind of go into that woo woo realm too, but there's a lot there. When I have interesting like knee pain, I'm like, oh, that's on my masculine side always. That always means I'm pushing too hard, or doing something I should not be doing. So I hope that's helpful to kind of give a little bit more actionable, like how you can actually utilize this work yourself because it's intuitive.
It is intuitive, and that's why I say it's a process to get there. It's not like you get to flip the switch. We're not taking a pill here. This isn't, a quick fix program. This is an onion with very, very millions and many and huge amounts of layers. Um, one thing, Angie, I think you should talk about this is the limbic side, the retraining of the limbic, because you probably do a lot of this with your clients. So what would you suggest for that?
Yeah. So, as mentioned, hypnotherapy is a huge component for limbic training. It's helping your brain reprocess essentially. Again, the dog chasing you, it's helping your brain reformulate a new story that not all dogs are unsafe. Not all jobs are scary. Not all people that want to meet you are threatening. So you're helping your brain kind of reprogram a generalization that it's had that's kept you in a loop. So there are, hypnotherapy, I do this with my clients all the time. There are a couple brain training programs out there. For some reason, I keep getting inundated with DNRS, which is I forget it's nervous system retraining. I forget what the D stands for. But it's a nervous system retraining program that exists out there. And the research I've done is people are finding some benefit from doing this work. And these things are things that take time too. I work with clients for 6 to 12 sessions, but in reality, it should be closer to 6 months. I mean, retraining the nervous system takes a lot of time, but it's also a daily practice. So you can't expect you're going to go see somebody for 1 or 2 sessions or even for a month or two and you're going to have a life-changing event. Your nervous system really hardwires these ways of being. So, whether you do DRNS, there's also the Gupta program, which is an interesting program. I actually had signed up for that. And it's a lot of what I do with my clients. It's a lot of parts therapy, inner child healing, a lot of mindfulness practices and meditation. And he set the program up to be a year. So he really wants people to have success with nervous system work. And it takes time. So first, also be gentle with yourself that you're not going to do this in a month, in a week, you're going to be filling your toolkit with different things that support you at different times in your journey. So those are some of the bigger ones that I'm familiar with. I don't recall, there's neurofeedback too, and I don't know if that kind of falls into the limbic retraining program or not, but people are finding some benefit with neurofeedback retraining as well, which is, it helps your brain retrain, and it uses an electrical device. Like, it's a electronic device that you actually use. And I don't know all the details of it. I've been curious to try. But people are finding some benefit with that too, because you're again retraining the brain with new stimulus, which is what you want.
Yeah. And it's so emotional, that the limbic that addresses the emotional side of things, and our emotions oftentimes are the leader of whatever's going on. So we have to really look at the emotional side of it. And Angie mentioned her Aura Ring. I use an Apple Watch. I have different apps on there, so it monitors my sleep. And so there are a lot of different tools out there to help you kind of track as you do this work. I'm a big person in keeping some measurements for me,
Mm,
because we don't just hit this spot where we're like, I'm healed, right? Well, we just keep peeling back the layers. But if you can see that maybe your sleep is better, maybe your HRV is better, my heart rate dip gets bigger at night now. And, my sleep quality overall, am I in REM or am I in that light sleep? I think that kind of stuff is really important. And once you start to pay attention to it, you'll start making different choices too. Alcohol is a big one. Like, if I have a drink, I can look at my data and be like, wow, that really tanked my sleep. That was not a nightcap that did me a favor. That one
mm,
did some bad stuff, but you start to make different choices. So it's all part of it. And you know what? Regulation isn't a luxury. We got to start looking at this as, this is our vessel. This is our responsibility. We don't need to be filthy rich to do this. We need to make simple changes, and we have to start to kind of look at ourselves as being important enough to have those. If you can go buy the house and the boat and the car and the gadgets and all the things, you definitely have the means to be able to sell yourself that kind of same thing in your physical body.
mhm.
It's not a luxury. It's more of a foundation. We're talking about quality of life. We're talking about, if you're going to live into your 80s, what do you want that person to look like? What would you want your children to have in their 80s? Would you want them to be debilitated, sick, angry, maybe not alive? You got to think about that.
Yeah.
So every healing protocol works better after the nervous system work. So all those supplements you're buying, all those workouts you're doing, all those things, if you put the nervous system beforehand, a lot of those things will start to pay off. You'll get your money's worth. Mhm.
And, the problem is that, as you said, like, the nutraceutical industry and the biohack industry is such a massive, like, billions of dollars in industry every year, selling you quick fixes, and none of them will work if you don't regulate your nervous system. And that's, as someone, you've spent over 100K on your healing. I've spent 50K in the last 5 years. And my body does not move until my nervous system is calm. Like, nothing I've done helps until my nervous system is good. And that hit me again. I'll kind of go into my brief story quickly here. Was in the last month or two, I was losing massive amounts of hair again. I had insane insomnia where I was waking up between 1 and 3. I felt very restless. I couldn't walk more than a mile. I was having mast cell activation symptoms. I was intolerant to all these foods that were giving me headaches, indigestion, all these problems. And I'm like, shit, like, okay, what am I missing? Right? Like, I'm doing air quote the right things. I'm eating, air quote the right things. I'm nourishing my body in the way I can. I'm taking the proper supplement protocol. I'd started some peptides that were supposed to heal too. And all these things just worsened my symptoms. And I was just baffled. And I had gone with my family to a resort for a week. And it wasn't super off grid, but off grid enough. Just that 1 week away from everything in life completely reset my body. And so that's also where you have to know what it is for you. Because I was doing the meditation, I was doing the grounding, I was doing all the stuff here. My body needed a full on pattern interrupt. Like, I had to leave my entire environment to get restoration. And I've sustained that now. It's been several weeks and I feel freaking amazing to where I'm eating all the things I want to eat again. And I don't feel like my body is inflamed like it was. In fact, I told you one of my symptoms was I can't eat when I'm that distressed. I've gained a few pounds and I'm okay with that because my body's actually wanting and like receiving nourishment from food. Um, so, and again, people might be like, well, it's a luxury to take a vacation. I hadn't had a vacation in a year. I didn't realize that until I looked at the calendar and was like, oh my God, 1 year from today, we were on the North Shore in Minnesota. That was the last vacation we had. And that can't happen. I prioritized paying off debt. I prioritized our investments and other things. And that's okay because that's important. At the same time, it was at the expense of my health. And again, with how busy our lifestyles are, yours may not be a full week off grid. Maybe you can do that in a couple days. For me, I know my body needs at least 3 to 4 days to just kind of sink into relaxation. So, like a quick weekend away is not enough for my system. Um, but because I did kind of a hard reset, now I can do those weekends with more benefit. So, you know, I think I joked and texted you, like, I've been eating like a douchebag and I feel great. Like, I was eating ice cream and gluten and all the things that I typically avoid, but my body is like feeling freaking awesome. So I'm going based on how I'm feeling and also still nourishing it with fruits and veggies and, like, of course, the things that I need. Um, but I don't feel bad. I slept like an angel again last night. It's unbelievable. My hair stopped falling out. I'm just like, I don't know. I guess that's all I needed was just a hard stop from everything. But I carried those routines forward. So I've also been going for pretty much daily hikes in nature. Like, I will go to a park that's away from all the energy of the cities. I am not having to rush my morning routine as much. I'm slowing down. Today I was like, I should work out. It's been a week. And then I was like, no, I've been walking. It's fine. I'm not going to stress my body. And so it's kind of like, how can I reduce the stimulation? How can I reduce some of the pressure? And again, this is not a luxury. This is an absolute necessity if you want to heal, that you find what works for you. But also the daily practices are great, the breath work, the other stuff. But sometimes if you need like a hard reset, just invest in a fucking vacation. And again, I'm not one to like say throw it on a credit card, but my God, your body will thank you. If you just take a reset break and say, this is an investment in my health, and don't beat yourself up because now you have a trip you have to pay for. So what? It's an investment in your health. If you have a child and they had to go to the doctor to have a $10,000 procedure to save their life, you wouldn't say, oh God, it's expensive. I'm going to have debt for a year for this. You'd be like, how fast can I get this done? I want them to be okay. Take that level of seriousness with your own healing, because this stuff is absolutely necessary, especially with the modern lifestyle. And especially if you're a business owner, we need a lot of vacation, a lot of breaks, because we are always on and it's a very different lifestyle. Not that the 9 to 5 life is easy either, but you get to check out at the end of the day. It's not your business. You get to kind of just shut down, let go of the work and move on. Um, so really just prioritizing that, it was such a big deal for my body. And I can't say that enough because that was the missing piece. Again, in the last few months when I was like, what the hell? Nothing's working here. Like, the diets aren't working, the things aren't working. I just needed a hard reset. So anyways, so with, we kind of talked about like what I did. You have to find what works for you as far as like a daily ritual of hygiene. So this is kind of some of the stuff I've reintegrated into my daily routine to keep these patterns going. Because I'm like, I feel amazing. I don't want to fall back into that dysregulated state. And I have to know. So as we said, I wear an Aura ring. If you're someone dissociated from your body and you can't tell up from down, left from right, how you're feeling, get something like this, please. Like, the Aura ring is not a fitness device. It is a device that tells you about your body. And it does track some movements and things like that, but it's not meant to be fitness. It's really meant to be like a stress and sleep tracker, and kind of hormonal tracker. So I tell all my clients about it. Again, I don't get kickbacks for this stuff. I really believe in this product, having invested thousands of dollars in stuff that doesn't work. This little $300 ring, phenomenal investment. It told me a lot. And it also told me before my cycle, my sleep sucks. I'm like, oh, interesting. Every month before I get my period, my sleep starts to decline. Good to know. I thought it was like something about me, but it was just a hormone change. So that was also neat too, just to learn those little tiny things that impact it. Or, if I was on a later call in the afternoon, my sleep would tend to be not great because I had that blue light. So it's just those little things that you can start to modify when you start to tune in to what it is. So again, whether it's an Apple Watch, Whoop Band, or a ring, something can be really helpful for you. So for the morning, and this is not new information, but prioritizing sunlight is huge. So I don't mean like looking out your window. I mean, getting your ass outside and being under the morning sun is really, 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 really important. to help your circadian rhythm, to help that natural production of melatonin. And then also, if you're someone who likes breath work, just do a few minutes of breath work. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute process. It could be 2 minutes of just focused breathing and then some affirmations around that. It's getting easier to heal. It's easier to feel safe in my body. Like I'm building routines that support my wellness, whatever. Midday, this is what I also do. Today, I'll be doing a walk this afternoon. Some kind of grounding. If you are in a climate where you can get out this time of year, get your ass outside. I don't care if it's for friggin' 5 minutes or an hour. Get your ass outside. Stick your body on the grass, hug a frickin' tree, like go immerse yourself in nature. You will not regret it. That should be the first thing prescribed when anybody has an ailment at the doctor, unless you like broken arm. But like if you have some kind of chronic stress related illness, heart disease, diabetes, something else, nature should be the first thing we prescribe. So get outside, get those healing energies from the planet we are gifted. And then in the evening, blue light blocking glasses, if you're someone who's on the screen a lot, whether you're watching TV, you have later meetings, or you have artificial lights in your home, blue blocking glasses can be very helpful to just eliminate, those rays that we're getting that are unnatural, that are again messing up our circadian rhythm. Jess, I know you have blue blocking glasses that you like. Do you remember the brand offhand for the listeners?
You know what? I bought them from a local biohacker. So I think it's like Primal Hacker or something like that. But I don't have a specific brand. I think they're his brand. But
So Well, yeah, and what I would say is if you get glasses, don't get the cheap ones on Amazon. They don't work. I mean,
no.
quality does matter in these things, and to get a good quality pair, you're probably spending at least $100. Or
Yes.
just get off the screens. Get off the screens a couple hours before bed, turn your lights down. Again, if you're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Midwest, this time of year, it's still light enough outside. Like get the natural light versus the unnatural, bulbs that we have, the LED and all that crap. That's so bad for us. Um, and then again, in the evening, you can do some gentle stretching, maybe some yoga poses, just kind of some gentle like chest opening. Like I tend to notice when I get stressed, I kind of go inward, my shoulders go up, my chest goes in. And so kind of just opening up your chest, kind of heart center opening, just kind of some gentle, if you have a foam roller, something like that can be really soothing. And you can also journal, how was your day? What was really great about your day? What was the challenge? What are you going to do differently? Um, and then, one of the biggest things I've learned in my journey is, I am a huge proponent for mindset, understanding the mind, understanding how it works. When you understand how the mind works, whether you work with a business coach like Jess, she talks about mindset a lot, someone like me who like that's what I do. Um, we talk about mindset and the importance of that because everything is choice. We always have a power to choose. I didn't know when I was younger that I have the power to choose to be happy. I can cultivate and create a mindset where I'm predominantly happy. I grew up in a home with a person who was very pessimistic all the fucking time. Everything was always wrong. There were always problems. Nothing was ever good. And I had kind of a negative outlook on life for a long time. And I have identified as someone who is generally very joyous. And that's a practice, so people are like, I'm just depressed. You're not fucking doing the work. Like, yes, there are chemical imbalances that can cause depression. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about disease induced depression. I'm talking about the woe is me mindset. Like that's a choice. And so you can choose to be happy though. You can choose to reframe your thinking at all times. You can pattern interrupt those anxious thoughts to cultivate joy. And one of the secrets of longevity, when you ask these people who live to over 100, is they're happy. It's not just that they live in a blue zone with all this healthy stuff. Yes, that's part of it, but they have community, they have strong relationships, they are joyous. So starting to reprogram your mind to look for the good instead of the negativity bias that we're all programmed with is so huge. So cultivate joy, whether it's just a daily reflection of like, what am I grateful for today? Like, gosh, the sunshine is out. That's amazing. It's going to be in the 80s here in Minnesota. Freaking awesome. I get to go have my roots done. Yay. Like, like little things that are just like, I get to go do these things. I can, it's fun to versus, oh, I have to. Like, so, mindset's so freaking important in all of this. So, anywho, we talked about my journey. We talked about a lot of stuff today. Jess, anything else you want to add before we kind of close this episode?
No, I mean, this is such a good episode and it's a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. And I think the bigger message is you get to decide. You get to decide. No matter what your life circumstances,
Mhm.
you get control of that. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and sticking with us through this very, very long, important episode. And we will see you next time.
See ya.